In the last 78 days, over 1,260 people had died in the Middle East. The world was on fire. In Tehran, 51,000 homes lay in rubble. On the streets, families searched through debris for anything, a photo, a memory, a reason to believe tomorrow would be different. But what the people on the streets didn't know was this. In the Pentagon, in the White House, and in Tehran's bunkers, a secret conversation was about to change everything. Within the next 60 minutes, a phone call would be made. And everything, the war, the negotiations, the future of global oil markets, and the lives of millions would hang in the balance. This is the story of what happened in those 60 minutes, and why everything you've been told about this crisis might be a lie. But before we can understand what happened in that 60-minute window, we need to understand what led to it. Because the story doesn't begin with a phone call, it begins with a choice. On a day 78 days earlier, the U.S. Department of Defense announced something called Project Freedom. The stated goal? Establish a security corridor through the Strait of Hormuz, protect international commerce, keep global oil markets stable. On paper, it sounded reasonable, defensive, protective. But intelligence analysts knew the real purpose. Gather data on Iranian military capabilities, test their response time, locate their missile systems, measure their vulnerability. On the first day, U.S. forces struck. Iranian militia boats were destroyed, or so the Pentagon claimed.
What happened next was crucial. Iran didn't escalate immediately. Instead, they waited, they watched, they calculated. But while diplomats spoke about security corridors and regional stability, real people were dying. In Tehran, the death toll climbed. 650 impact sites, 1,260 dead, 3,000 wounded, and the world economy began to collapse. Oil prices spiked, global markets panicked, families everywhere started feeling the pressure in their wallets. Then came the paradox that would define everything. The White House began talking about negotiations, but the Pentagon kept deploying troops. Peace was being announced while war was being prepared. On day 78, at a BRICS summit in a distant capital, Iran's foreign minister made a stunning revelation. He announced that Trump's administration had sent a message, direct communication, not through intermediaries, through secret channels. The offer was audacious. Iran would freeze its nuclear program for 2 decades. In exchange, some sanctions would be lifted. It was the first genuine diplomatic signal in months. But there was one problem, a massive one. Iran still had tons of enriched uranium, enough for multiple weapons. The US wanted it all gone. Iran refused to give it up. It was their only insurance policy against American betrayal. And then on the evening of May 16th, with the world balanced on a knife's edge, everything changed. A phone rang in the White House. And what happened in the next 60 minutes would rewrite the Middle East's future. At 11:47 p.m., the Secretary of Defense received intelligence about something happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Ships moving, Iranian vessels positioning. Something was about to happen. Iran had positioned anti-ship missiles, multiple weapon systems. They were targeting American naval assets. This wasn't posturing. This was preparation for combat.
The Pentagon wanted immediate authorization for strikes, preemptive action, take out the missile systems before Iran could launch. It was the standard playbook. But before that authorization could be given, Trump received a call. Not from the Pentagon, from someone else. Someone with intelligence the Pentagon didn't have. There are certain people in the world who exist between nations. Back-channel diplomats, intelligence brokers, people who know things governments don't officially know. And this person had just received something from Tehran. The revelation? Iran wasn't preparing to attack American ships. They were preparing for an Israeli strike. Intelligence suggested a major operation was being planned. Iran's weapons positioning was defensive, not offensive. Trump faced an impossible choice. Give the Pentagon the green light for preemptive strikes, or believe the intermediary's intelligence. One choice leads to all-out war. The other leads to a chance at peace. If he struck, Iran would retaliate. Israel would attack. Russia and China would respond. Within 72 hours, the Middle East would be engulfed in a regional war that could become global. Oil markets would collapse, economies would crash, millions could die. Or Trump could believe in the possibility of peace. A 45-day window, a chance to negotiate a nuclear deal that would reshape the entire region. No one had done it before. No president had successfully negotiated with Iran while military pressure was at its peak. At 11:59 p.m., Trump made his decision. He called the Pentagon. One word: stand down. Project Freedom was being suspended. The Pentagon was stunned. Minutes away from authorized strikes, weapon systems armed, targets locked, and suddenly ordered to stand down. In Tehran,
military commanders were shocked to see the American fleet withdrawing. No strikes came, no escalation, just silence. For the first time in 78 days, there was silence.
Within 30 minutes, the White House announced it. Project Freedom was being suspended. Not canceled, suspended. There would be a 45-day diplomatic window, a chance to negotiate something that had seemed impossible just hours before. The midnight phone call had worked. The 60-minute crisis was over. No new strikes, no escalation. But the cost remained. 1,260 dead, 51,000 homes destroyed, millions of lives changed forever. But here's where the story gets complicated, because what happened in those 60 minutes wasn't the end of the crisis. It was the beginning of something far more uncertain, a 45-day window to negotiate the impossible. But here's what makes the story so strange. While diplomatic talks began, the Pentagon kept doing something else. It kept deploying weapons, more soldiers, more missiles, more aircraft. The official line was, "We're building a defensive posture, ensuring our allies' security. The ceasefire is fragile, and we must be prepared." Military analysts saw a pattern. This had happened before, in 2015, when America first negotiated with Iran. Every time talks seemed promising, military pressure would increase, and eventually, the talks would collapse. So the real question emerged. Was this genuine peace? Or was it a 45-day delay while both sides prepared for inevitable war? Was Trump's midnight decision a breakthrough, or was it just tactical repositioning? In Tehran, military commanders studied American troop movements. They counted the weapons, they calculated response times, and they came to a conclusion. The Americans weren't preparing for peace, they were preparing for war. Because the fundamental problem remained unsolved: Iran's enriched uranium. America wanted every gram destroyed or shipped out. Iran refused. It was their only insurance policy against American betrayal. And there was another factor: the economic vulnerability. 1/3 of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran closes it, even temporarily, oil prices spike, economies crash, governments fall.
But there's a dimension most people don't understand. China is now Iran's lifeline. If America attacks Iran, China loses a strategic partner. Russia's security interests are tied to Iran's survival. India depends on Iranian oil. This isn't just a US-Iran conflict anymore, it's a global chess game. While negotiations continued, real people were living in limbo. Displaced, grieving, uncertain. In Lebanon, over 3,000 were dead. In Iran, 1,260. In the Palestinian territories, the toll was even higher, and they were all waiting to see if the next 45 days would bring peace or war. But there's something the public wasn't being told. Project Freedom wasn't just a military operation, it was also an intelligence operation. The US was gathering data on Iranian capabilities, testing their defenses, learning their vulnerabilities. What American intelligence learned in those 78 days was crucial. They now knew exactly where Iran's nuclear facilities were, how well they were defended, how quickly Iran could respond to threats. They had a complete picture for the first time. Some military analysts believe Trump's real game was different. Propose negotiations, get Iran to trust, learn their capabilities, and then, when the 45 days are over, use that intelligence to strike with maximum effectiveness. But it's also possible, just possible, that the midnight phone call changed something real. That Trump genuinely recognized the danger. That this 45-day window could lead to something unprecedented. A real nuclear deal. A lasting peace.
What happens in the next 45 days will matter. For the 1,260 who already died. For the 51,000 displaced. For the world economy. For the future of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. In the end, the midnight phone call stopped one war. But it didn't solve the fundamental questions. Can America and Iran truly negotiate? Or is this just a pause between conflicts? We have 45 days to see which vision becomes reality, the peaceful one or the catastrophic one. What you've learned here is what few people understand, the real story behind the headlines, the human cost behind the statistics, the uncertainty behind the official statements. Stay informed. Watch this space, because when history moves this fast, missing one story means missing the whole truth. This has been The Full Story. Subscribe for more documentaries on geopolitics, history, and the stories that shape our world.